Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat? And we got some main course for you. We're going to go over my reaction and key moments and kind of the play-by-play of the Saints 20-17 victory over the Carolina Panthers, and that was in Carolina. So the Saints get their first road win of the season, so that's good, and first divisional and conference win of the season. So I think the Falcons already beat the Panthers and already beat another NFC team. So that puts the Falcons ahead of the Saints in like a tie break because one of the Saints win came against the AFC team, the different conference in the NFL. But this was another nail biter. I wouldn't say that it was as close as the Tennessee Titan game. What wasn't quite as stressful, but it was still a close game. I would almost label these games all close to being carbon copies of each other because the Saints, they looked real sluggish in the first three quarters and then kind of turned it on in the fourth quarter. That's very similar to what happened in the Tennessee Titans game. But it's just week two. You got a new quarterback. You don't have Alvin Kamara, so I think it's a little early to be too hard on anyone on this team, not just Derek Carr, but even the offensive line. But let's get into this. Let's get into the kind of my key moments of this game. I got quite a few of them. I think maybe have more than than I did last week because there were a lot of key moments and moments that kind of sparked momentum kind of for both teams at times. But anyways, so this would have been at the 12:41 mark of the first quarter. It's third and six, and shouldn't be surprised. This is the first drive of the Saints. This is nothing people should be surprised. Wasn't completely cleaned up in 2 weeks, but Carr drops back and he's sacked by Frankie Luvu. And I've seen some people say like are continuing to like bash Trevor Penning and saying he's terrible and he's the whole reason the offensive line is bad. Like really, it's not it hasn't just been solely on Trevor Penning because on this play, the first sack that Carr took of the game on a third down, the pressure, the initial pressure came off the right side. I think it was Brian Burns. He just completely smoked uh, Ryan Ramczyk on a speed rush, and he wasn't the one that made the sack. Frankie Luvu, the guy coming off Trevor Penning's side, is the one that made the sack. But still, Ryan Ramczyk's poor pass block on that play was the reason Derek Carr was moved off of his spot and basically walked back into a sack by the man that Trevor Penning was blocking. Frankie Luvu, who he was a issue. Blocking Frankie Luvu all night was an issue. I believe he had 2 sacks in the game. So the Panthers get the ball, and they actually look pretty good on their first drive. So this was at the 7:40 mark of the first quarter. It was just a 4th and 5. So Eddie Pinheiro kicks a 52-yard field goal, and this just kills me when the Saints are playing against opposing teams, whether it's in the dome or if it's outside and inclement weather. Like it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. A kicker is going to either tie their career long or break their career long, and he just bangs in a 52-yard field goal right down the middle with uh, distance to go, like yards to spare on it. Like it was just easy. Like if the opposing offense is kicking a field goal over 50 yards, you can almost guarantee they're going to make it. And that was Eddie Pinheiro's career long. He tied his career long with that field goal. And then so the Saints get the ball back, and they're kind of driving, trying to get their own field goal of the game. But at the 2 minute and 50-second mark of the first quarter, it's a 1st and 10. I believe it was a run, maybe like a 5-6 yard run by Taysom Hill, and they were at the Carolinas 25. A lot of action happened inside the Carolinas 30 in this game, but at the Carolinas 25, uh, while Shaq Thomas is trying to make the tackle, Trevor Penning is blocked like pancake blocked by the defensive lineman into Shaq Thomas's leg. They said it was a shin injury originally, or I think they said it was an ankle injury first. Then they came out and said it was a shin injury, but he has a broken fibula, so there's a good chance he's out for the season. And I say it a million times, 100 times. You never want to see a player get injured, but Shaq Shaq Thomas with Brian Burns and Derek Brown, he's probably one of Carolina's best defensive player, and him getting hurt early in this game probably ended up helping the Saints later on in the game. So it was horrible luck for them, but not something I celebrate. But good, it ended up being good luck for the Saints that he went out of the game. So then the Saints drive down a little bit farther down the field, get in the red zone, and it's the 39 seconds left in the first quarter. It's 3rd and 3 at Carolina's 10-yard line, and Carr just it seemed like he had enough time on the play. The offensive line pass blocked pretty good on this play, and I guess he just couldn't find anyone because he threw it in Michael Thomas's direction, but it was just completely over his head and back out of the back of the end zone. So the Saints early on continue to deal with sacks and issues in the red zone. So this game is just like I've already stated, it's very similar to the Tennessee Titans game. Not being able to score in the red zone, the offensive line having trouble with pass blocking. But so the game's 3-3 at this point. So there's really no need to panic at this point, even though it's still a close game and it's early on. So then at the 14:26 mark of the second quarter, it's 3rd and 6. And Alontae Taylor, he almost comes down with an interception. I think Alontae Taylor must lead the league in players that have started that have been starting cornerbacks in the league that have almost interceptions. He almost always gets an interception or is either out of bounds or gets called back because of a defensive penalty. And yeah, he caught this interception off of Bryce Young. It was 3rd and 6, and he caught it and he rolled over on the body of the receiver that it was thrown to and just bounced out of bounds. It was kind of similar to Rashid Shaheed's kickoff return last week when he fumbled and Amari Hooker just kind of bounced out of bounds afterwards. But the difference between this play was none of Alontae Taylor's body touched in bounds. It literally just bounced on top of the receiver and just went directly out of bounds. So Alontae Taylor, I know a lot of people love him, and he's been surprisingly good in the slot when he didn't look overly great on the outside or in the slot in preseason. But Alontae Taylor, he's still searching for that. He's on that hunt for his first career interception, and hopefully his luck can change. And talking about luck, this was at the 11:47 mark of the second quarter. It's a 1st and 10, and Jamal Williams has like a short gain. And this, like I said, a lot of interesting stuff happened inside the Carolinas 30. So this was at the 23-yard line. So once they got down in there, I'm thinking, maybe Jamal Williams may get a chance to bang in a short touchdown like he was known for having 17 of them last year. But this ended up being his last carry of the game. This one would be the last time we saw Jamal Williams, besides seeing him on the sideline in the blue tent coming out, trying to test his legs and then going back in. And then they finally took his helmet, and then he just went to the locker room and you never saw him again. But I guess he's out with a hamstring injury, already dealing with that with Kendra Miller, but he's got a hamstring injury, and Dennis Allen just said it's going to take some time, whatever that means. It's going to take some time for him to heal. So that tells me it may be severe, it may be a pretty bad hamstring pull. I've seen some people say it could be 3 to 6 weeks. Hopefully it's on the shorter side of that, and hopefully they don't have to end up putting him on IR, a short-term IR, that is. But yeah, after that was the last time we saw Jamal Williams. but then then at the 10:50 mark of the second quarter, it's 3rd and 9 at the so this came right after the Jamal Williams play. It's at the or 2 plays later at the Carolina's 23-yard line, so they weren't able to like move it at all after Jamal Williams went out. Carr completes a crazy catch, and Michael Thomas makes a crazy catch on a 19-yard completion where he's like jumping up in the air and like falling backwards. And I thought it was a catch right away. I think I've already said this when it comes to negative plays and positive plays for the Saints. I'm always going to be a little biased. I think all fans of any team are going to be like that unless they're just someone that's super pessimistic and down on their team, even though they're still a fan. But in live speed, I thought it was a catch for sure. I thought he got his right cheek down. One cheek equals 2 feet, and then they did the replay of it, and heck, he got both of his cheeks down, but his entire butt down and his back. So it wasn't even close, really, to not being a catch. So that set the Saints up big time for a play. I think that got them down like at the 3-yard line. So I thought for sure they were going to score at that point. So then it's at the 9:55 mark of the second quarter. It's 3rd and goal, and Carr just wasn't able to hook up for like a Texas route, or just a quick slant under from going in, and an over route by Tony Jones Jr. And just couldn't hook up with him. And I can guarantee you if Alvin Kamara was in on that play, that would have ended up being a touchdown. So they weren't able to hook up on that touchdown. Not really surprised that Derek Carr and him have communication problems and don't have a real connection yet, because he was just brought up for this game from the practice squad. He was a game day designation, call up, and was just after the Jamal Williams injury, he was pretty much thrown into the starting lineup. Him and Taysom Hill, who had a great game as well. So then Carolina, they don't really do anything with their next drive after that. But then it's the 3-minute and 6-second mark of the second quarter. It's a 3rd and 5, and Carr throws another horrible interception to Von Bell. It's intercepted by Von Bell and returned a little ways up the field. It was just an awful interception. It was very reminiscent to the one that was thrown like directly to Amari Hooker in the Tennessee Titan game. This one was a little bit different because he had time to throw on this play. Like, there was no need for him to try to force this throw into triple coverage, and it was just a lollipop throw. It put way too much air under it, and it was probably Von Bell didn't have a lot of interceptions when he was with the Saints, but this was probably the easiest interception of his career. So that was just ridiculous, a ridiculous interception to give up. And Carr talks about being dumb and forcing stuff, and I already knew this about Carr coming in to this team and coming on to the Saints. That a lot of his turnovers, man, are just awful. Every time you see him throw an interception, it's basically thrown right to a defender, and it has you scratching your head and thinking, like, what are you doing? So not surprised that happened, but in the situation, it was a little ridiculous because it was just, he wasn't under pressure. The only pressure he was under was that it was a 3rd and 5. So that's just something Carr does. I think people are going to have to get used to that he has some dumb turnovers sometimes that hopefully he can break that streak where he doesn't have any turnovers, or at least no dumb interceptions in the game next week against Green Bay. But then he ends up getting bailed out, though. Defense been bailing him out for the first 2 weeks, honestly, just looking elite. It's fun watching an elite defense, after all the years of them being horrible under Sean Payton. But at the 1-minute and 41-second mark of the second quarter, it's a 3rd and 6 at the Saints 18-yard line. So they're almost like guaranteed to get points if because they're driving trying to get a touchdown. Carl Granderson, they were at least going to get a field goal out of this. They were probably looking to get more, but they were at the 18, so they were in the Saints red zone. Carl Granderson comes up with a strip sack on Bryce Young, and that just shuts them out on the quarter and the down from being able to get any points. But the Saints weren't able to do anything with that either. So it ends up just going into the fourth quarter. I think the Saints got the ball back, and uh, they may have been an incompletion or a short gain on second down, and they got up to like the midfield, and Derek Carr got sacked like back to back, and that pretty much just killed their drive. And then the Panthers with like 28 seconds just like nailed it out. But anyways, the Panthers end up getting the ball first to start the second half, and it's a 13:43 of the third quarter, and it's 3rd and 9 at the Carolina's 26-yard line. So once again, a lot of action happened inside the Carolina's 30. Bryce Young is strip sacked again, a combination of getting hit by Cam Jordan and Brian Breesy, and it took forever. I swear it must have been one of the latest flags ever, because every time the Saints make a good play or even a bad play, I'm always looking for a flag, always waiting that 30 seconds after the play to make sure it doesn't get called back because of a flag. And then even the announcers weren't very aware of it, and they didn't show like a highlight of it, like a replay of it, until a couple plays later. And I guess on the play, Paulson Adebo was holding, so it gets called back, and that would have been such a momentum swing. Like that right there could have possibly been the nail in the Carolina Panthers coffin there. Like it could have been a call game at that moment. And just Bryce Young is just, even though it gets called back, it's a good illustration that Bryce Young had been under pressure a lot in this game. And Brian Bresee looking good. He's carried over his performance from preseason to the regular season. But they end up keeping the ball and moving it a little bit more down the field. And then at the 9:15 mark of the third quarter, it's a 4th and 5, and Eddie Pinheiro, and our guy Eddie Pinheiro hits a 54-yard field goal, and that ended up being his career long. And he, just like the 52-yard, he bangs the 54-yard right down the middle. Just when they come in for these long field goals, kicking them against the Saints. Never really expecting that. That's a good time to go get a bathroom break or a drink break, because there's really no hope that they're ever going to miss them. I don't know. The Saints are cursed when it comes to kickers just making long field goals against them. I used to always just think it was Younghoe Koo, because he's so good that he just like pretty much never misses a field goal. But it's starting to carry over with the Carolina's kicker Eddie Pinheiro now too. And then moving on to the next key moment, highlight of this game. It's the 7:22 mark of the third quarter, and it's a 3rd and 7, and Carr hits Chris Olave with a crazy. Once again, the catch was crazier than the throw, because he was getting pass interfered, which they didn't even call that after the play. He's getting pass interfered. One of his arms is getting held down, and he tips it to himself and catches it and goes down, and that ended up being a 52-yard catch that ignited the Saints on this drive. And then the Saints end up getting down into the red zone and the goal-to-go area, and it's a 2:56 of the third quarter, and it's 1st and goal at the Carolinas 2, and Tony Jones Jr. pounds it in for a touchdown. So kind of Tony Jones Jr. kind of poaching some touchdowns, the type of touchdowns Jamal Williams was known for getting while Jamal Williams was hurt and he was the starter, because he filled in nicely after him, and Taysom Hill filled in nicely after Jamal Williams went out. So then the Saints have a pretty respectable lead at that moment. They're up by a full 7 points, and that felt like hell, that felt like 3 touchdowns with the way this game was going. And then it's the third at the Carolina Panthers don't really do anything with their next drive, and then it's the 13:32 moment of the fourth quarter. It's a 3rd and 2, and the Saints are at midfield. They're past midfield. They're like at their own uh, they're at like the Carolinas 42-yard line, I think. And there was a lot of conversation about whether the Saints would maybe just run it here and then maybe go for it on 4th and 2 because it was still a little too long to a little bit out of Blake Grupe's field goal range. But Derek Carr, I don't have to worry about them having to make that decision because Derek Carr ends up getting knocked out of field goal range by taking another sack in this game. So the score stays the same. It stays at a 50. Stays. I think it stayed at 13-6 at that point still. And then the Carolina Panthers are start kind of putting a little bit of a drive together. It's a 9:20 mark of the fourth quarter. It's a 3rd and 11, and I'm thinking if the Carolina Panthers don't pick this up here, it could be the nail in the coffin. It may be like their last chance to really get back in this game. And Young takes off, scrambles. I guess there wasn't great gap integrity in the middle of the defensive line, and Young takes off for a big gain right up the middle and makes Marcus May look like an absolute clown. I think Marcus May have thought that Young May was maybe going to slide there, but he didn't slide and ended up picking up like another 10 yards because of like the horrible tackle attempt by Marcus May. He literally just like put like one arm out at him and just got completely clowned on the play. It was bad. That was probably the worst moment of the game for the defense. Because other than that, they looked just great. They looked unstoppable. They were pretty much perfect all game until like towards the end when they started playing prevent defense. But once again, they're able to. Demario Davis ends up bailing out Marcus May after having that horrible play because they get kind of deep into Saints territory and into the red zone there in an area where maybe they might think about going for it. So it's the 6 minute and 12-second mark of the fourth quarter. It's 3rd and 3, and Young is scrambling around and scrambles out of the pocket, and Demario Davis just chases him down like easily from behind for a sack, and that makes it similar to the Saints play when Carr got sacked on 3rd and short and down in Carolina territory where they might have to make a decision of whether they're going to go for it or not. So the Carolina Panthers ended up just having to settle for another field goal there. That had really no choice about if they were going to go for it or not because of the Demario Davis sack. So then it's a Saints next drive. It's a 4:44 of the fourth quarter. It's a 2nd and 11, and Carr and Shaheed pretty much called game again. They called game again, just like they did in the Tennessee Titans game, and they were able to connect on a 45-yard catch that put the Saints deep into Carolina Panthers territory. And then at the 3-minute and 18-second mark of the fourth quarter, it's 1st and goal at the Carolinas 2 again, and Tony Jones Jr. has a nice cut to inside and gets another touchdown. But the Carr and Shaheed hookup and late game heroics have been a thing of beauty, an art form by these two. As the season goes on, I just hope it continues. That's the difference between this Saints team and last year's Saints team is that they're able to finish games and close out games. Like these are games that with Jameis Winston or Andy Dalton or Trevor Siemian or McCown, any of those quarterbacks that the Saints have had, they wouldn't win these games last year. They wouldn't win these close nail-biter games. But Derek Carr and Shaheed, they do it again. They do it again with another 40-yard hookup to set up the kind of the game winning touchdown here. So that puts Saints up 20-9. And then we're talking about prevent defense. So prevent defense is all I know about prevent defense is they prevent you from winning. That's what they prevent. That's the only thing they prevent. But the Saints just didn't play a very good form of prevent defense because they were playing off and trying to make the Panthers catch stuff underneath, which they did, but they weren't able to tackle them in bounds. Every time they pick up 5 yards, 10 yards here, like all they would have had to do is tackle them in bounds once or twice and make them use all their timeouts so that even if they do score, there'd be like pretty much no time on the clock once they're kicking or attempting an onside kick. But they pretty much just march down the field and score a touchdown, and then even score get the 2 point conversion. So then a lot of people were already thinking the game was over at that point. But no, not with the Saints. Unless there's 0-0-0 on the clock, the game isn't over. So then it's 20-17 at that point, just a 3 point game. And luckily, they were able to recover. DeMarco Jackson was able to recover the onside kick, and then Taysom Hill just closes it out with the first down run. And then the Panthers just don't have any timeouts. And yeah, it was another nail-biting, exciting game coming down to the wire. The defense just looks elite, and yeah, it's the Saints are 2-0 for like the first time since 2013, which is just crazy to think. I think the Carolina I was looking back when the Cleveland Browns and Pittsburgh Steelers game was going on, and it looked there towards kind of close towards the end that maybe the Cleveland Browns were going to win and be 2-0 as well. And they were talking about how the Cleveland Browns haven't been like 2-0 since like 1994 or 1993. So the Saints, you're thinking like the Saints haven't been 2-0 in 10 years, but hell, there's teams like the Cleveland Browns who haven't been 2-0 for 30 years. So that was a wild stat that I kind of stumbled across during the night. But let's go over some stats here, and I'll go over my player of the game and hot takes and game score pick. So this is just easy to do this now for my player of the game. So we'll go over quarterbacks first. So the player of the game, these kind of go in order actually, over my player of the game, hot takes, and game score. But I picked Derek Carr to be my player of the game in this game, and not specifically on if he's going to throw touchdowns or if he's going to look bad throwing interceptions or anything like that. I just said he was going to get 300 yards passing, but he wasn't able to get that. The majority of his yards came like late in the third quarter, and third quarter, and then into the fourth quarter, you had a couple of 40-yard hookups to Alave and Rashid Shaheed. So that right there was like 100 of his yards right there. But he wasn't great on the night. He was only 21 of 38 or 36, which is 58-yard completion percentage. He was 20 and only had 228 yards passing with 6.3 average, no touchdowns, but he did have another interception. But you have to take into account he was sacked 4 times for a 29-yard loss, and then his QBR was 37.8, and his quarterback rating was 65.5. So not very impressive from Derek Carr. He made the big plays when they needed him though. So that's all it really counts. But he really just needs to. I think obviously the offensive line needs to play better, but he really needs to clean up those terrible turnovers. Throwing interceptions right to defenders. You just can't do that, and especially in these close games. The Saints have been very lucky to nullify some of the sacks and the turnovers that Derek Carr's had. He definitely needs to be sending flowers to his defense because they've been helping him out a lot. And then a hot take here for the Saints, because we're just going over the rushing. I expected the Saints. They only rushed for like 65 yards against the Tennessee Titans. I stated for one of my hot takes that the Saints are going to rush for at least 100 yards in this game, and they did. They ended up having a total of 134 yards rushing in this game. And you got to thank Taysom Hill for the majority of that, because Taysom Hill had 9 carries for 65 yards with an 8.3 average. So he was just killing the Panthers out there. They just couldn't stop it. And he had a long of 19. And then Tony Jones Jr., we said he filled in nicely after Jamal Williams went out. He had 12 carries for 34 yards. It's only a 20.8 yard carry, but he had 2 carries from like the 2 yard line where he got in for touchdowns, but only had a long of 6 yards. And then Jamal Williams, who got hurt, we may not see him for a little while now. It may be really, really pivotal that Kendra Miller comes back from his hamstring and knee injury now that Jamal Williams is out, or might sign someone off the waiver wire or some free agent. So unrestricted free agent. But Jamal Williams, before he went out with that hamstring, it's not like he was lighting it up or anything. He hasn't really looked amazing or been lighting it up in the first 2 games anyway. So I really don't know how big of a loss. Like obviously you don't want a player to hurt, but I don't know how big of a loss losing Jamal Williams for a couple weeks is, because it looks hopefully we'll be getting Kendra Miller back, and then in week 4 Alvin Kamara will be back. So I don't know if it's a huge loss, because he had 9 carries before he got hurt for 29 yards with a 3.2 uh, per carry average. So, and I had a long of 7, so he wasn't like amazing anyways. But hopefully he'll heal up soon. He'll be back in enough time to to where you'll finally kind of get to see that 1-2 combo or three-headed monster of Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams and Kendra Miller. And then let's see here, onto the receiving game. The Saints, Derek Carr didn't have an amazing day passing the yards, but the three-headed monster at receivers, they all looked good in this game, because Chris Olave had 6 catches for 86 yards with a 14.3 average. Didn't have any touchdowns, but had that big time crazy one-handed catch for 42 yards, and that came off of 11 targets. And then Rashid Shaheed had 4 catches for 63 yards with a 15.8 yard per carry average. No touchdowns, but had a long of 45, and that came off of 4 targets. So he caught everything that was thrown to him. That's really impressive. He's been really good in that. He's taken advantage of his opportunities. And then Michael Thomas looked like old Michael Thomas. It looked like he was about to have 10 catches for 100 yards in this game, or early on in this game, because he had 7 catches for 55 yards, a 7.9 yard per carry average with that crazy like flying backward 19-yard catch, and that came off of 9 targets. So they were really targeting him, and he was almost catching everything thrown to him as well. And then let's see, and then we're expecting to probably see like more Juwan Johnson in this game, or more Jimmy Graham, just in the season in general. But the hookups to Foster Monroe were some big plays in this game. So you kind of got to see him more than you did Juwan Johnson or Jimmy Graham, because Foster Monroe had 2 catches for 20 yards with a 10-yard average with a 14-yard long. That came off of 2 targets. And then Juwan Johnson only had 2 catches as well, but only for 13 yards with a 16.5 yard average, no touchdowns, a long of 8. But he was targeted 3 times, so he was targeted 1 more time than Foster Monroe. And then there really wasn't much action out of any of the other receivers in the game. And then just the tackle leaders on the day, Marcus May had 7 total tackles, 6 solo. And then he had a sack as well. Demario Davis had 7 total tackles, 4 solo. He also had a sack and a tackle for loss and a quarterback hit. Let's see, and then Pete Warner also had 7 tackles with 3 solo, and he recovered the fumble, the strip sack fumble by Carl Granderson. So your kind of your 2 best linebackers and your strong safety led the team with the tackles, all having 7 tackles, and then Carl Granderson had 2 total tackles, both solo with the strip sack and a tackle for loss and 2 quarterback hits. And then I guess I missed Nathan Shepard's sack, but he had 2 tackles, 1 solo and 1 sack and 1 tackle for loss, and then 2 quarterback or let's see, and 2 quarterback hits as well. So he had similar numbers to Carl Granderson. But I guess I missed Nathan Shepard being in there making plays. And then Rashid Shaheed returned Bo. I think he returned majority, like once again, kind of like the Tennessee Titans game. He was taking those kickoff returns out of the end zone, but he was his average was okay. He had 2 kickoff returns for 47 yards with a 23.5 yard average and a long of 25. So basically, he could have just been a little safer and just called fair catch on those plays. And then a punt return, Rashid Shaheed had one nice punt return. All the other ones he called fair catch on, but had a nice one punt return for 16 yards, and that got the Saints in Carolina, close to Carolina territory, close to midfield. And then Blake Rupe, Blake Rupe not looking like a rookie, was 2 for 2 on his field goals. They were all kind of chip shots. They weren't anything longer than 30 yards, and then he was 2 for 2 on extra points. So he had 8 points. He almost accounted for half the Saints' points again, just like last week against Tennessee Titans when he accounted for almost all their points. And then Lou Hedley looked kind of bad at times. I think his first punt was up around like the 25, 30 yard line, something like that, and it was just a shank. It was just like a 29-yard punt that went out of bounds, and then you see the ref on the sidelines walk in and continue to walk, and that actually led to 3 points for the Panthers. That bad punt, and then he also had one where the Saints were at like midfield, and he punted it into the end zone. Couldn't get them inside their 20 because it bounced into the end zone. So those were 2 really bad punts that Lou Hedley had. But he was had 5 punts for 210 yards, a 42-yard average, which is an okay average. And then did have 2 inside the 20. They were just barely inside the 20, and then had a long of 59. But Lou Hedley didn't look great in this game. He was not very impressive in this game. Let's just say it like that. And so that my player of the game was Derek Carr. He wasn't able to get the 300 yards passing that I was looking for, but the Saints offensively were able to get 100 yards rushing with 134 yards. And then kind of my other hot take, this was a kind of a going for like a negative towards the Carolina Panthers, was I didn't think Bryce Young was going to pass for over 200 yards in this game again, like he did against the Falcons, and he didn't. He was 22 of 33, and an okay pass completion percentage, and then he only had 153 yards. So, and heck, half of those yards, half of the Carolina Panthers yards all night came on the last drive when they drove like 75 yards and got a touchdown. But his average was a 4.6 average. He did have the garbage time touchdown, and he was sacked 4 times too, like Derek Carr, for a 14-yard loss. And he had a 60.7 QBR and a 87.1 quarterback rating. But this game was very, very similar. So my 2 hot takes hit, but my player of the game didn't hit. And then I picked this game. I picked the Saints to win this game, 27-14. So the score was close. The Saints continued to hold opponents under 20 points, and I picked the winner right. So the majority of my predictions were right on this game. I think that a lot better than last week against the Tennessee Titans, even though those games were very similar. They were nail biters. You got to see some elite defense, but the Saints are 2-0. I mean, who dat? You can't complain about that, especially seeing how they haven't done that in 10 years. So I'm happy. I was excited, and it was nice. It was nice that they had the doubleheader because even after the Saints win, you still got to watch another half of football. So that was kind of nice, and that's something that doesn't happen late at night, for Monday night games or Sunday night games. But so that was nice to kind of sit back and relax and watch some more football afterwards. But anyways, I just before I go here, I want to shout out Calvin Washington 429. I wanted to do that at the beginning, but I almost forgot. But he's a Saints fan from Arizona, commenting who dat right back to you. Anyone that likes or shares or comments, I really appreciate it. And just get at me. I want to hear from the fans, especially because the Saints are doing good now. Likes and shares, subscribing, all that. I'm all. I really love it. If I can identify you, I'll give you a shout out like I'm giving Calvin Washington 492 right now. But he's saying that he's a Houdat, a Saints fan from Phoenix, Arizona. We have Houdats all over the world, and so yeah, I just want to say Houdat back to you, and I appreciate the comments. Keep them coming, keep them rolling. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So Houdat, and can I get a check, please?